Hi, Tina. Thank you for joining us and being on time, being early. We will be getting started in about 7 minutes. Hey, folks. Thanks for joining. This is National Bailout Free Black Mamas webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about comms, and we will be getting started in a few minutes. Cool. It is 6 o'clock Eastern, and we are going to get started. Thank you all for being here and for joining us. Some of y'all were really early and appreciate y'all eagerness to hop in. For those of you, as an introduction, this is National Bailout's Free Black Mamas webinar series and a part of a larger webinar series that we do during our bailout season to share some of our tactics and our strategies and give information so folks can throw down and be a part of our movement to Free Black Mamas this year and beyond. My name is Arissa Hall. I am the project director of National Bailout. I'm joined by some dope folks who are also a part of National Bailout who will be speaking to y'all about comms. We have a very rich agenda, and our main objectives of that agenda today is to introduce the narrative strategy and vision behind Free Black Mamas campaign, and to provide some best practices for messaging and branding, and both from the local and national perspective. So we are going to be joined by our staff member, Delane, a member of BLM Memphis and Song, Shahida Jones, Erica May from Color of Change, and also Stephen Pargett of Militia Design. So we are about to get into it, and we will get into a welcome really quickly. Then we'll talk about the local bailout comms work and framing, and then we'll go into just some comms basics for folks. We'll then go into more of a top-line messaging, and we'll talk about the toolkit that we have that's available to folks that want to make sure that they have aligned messaging with us. And then we're going to talk about digital assets to definitely ensure that messaging and style is aligned with us. And then we're going to leave some room for question and answers at the end. And again, super glad that y'all have joined and super glad to get into it. So I'm just going to start us off by sharing a grounding for National Bailout. So National Bailout is a collective of Black organizations and groups across the country. And we currently consist of 13 groups and organizations that represent both local and national groups and orgs that are Black led and Black centered. We are building a community-based movement to end child detention and mass criminalization. We came to be back in the day, which is 2017, to basically create an intervention around the ways that money bail and pretrial detention was harming our communities. And solely came together due to an invitation by Songco director Mary Hooks to do a Black Mamas bailout. And from that bailout, we formed the National Bailout Collective, which is the organizations and members that committed to throwing down into freeing Black mamas that first year in 2017. And since then, we have built out over 400 folks, which I'm super proud and excited to share and counting. As you all know, we are doing our bailouts currently in response to COVID-19 and moving into the Black Mamas bailout in May. And we have some strategic priorities to ground our work and to also lead the work that we do beyond bailouts. But first and foremost, they start with bailouts and specifically Black Mamas bailout. So our strategic priority is to bail out Black mamas and caregivers, because as y'all all know on this call, that is what we do and that's what we do well and that's what we created together. And it's a way that we are able to identify our people and to immediately change the material conditions that they exist under. Our second strategic priority is to build a political community with the folks that we bail out. So we do not see ourselves solely as social service providers or bail payers, though we recognize that is very important roles and work, but we also see ourselves as co-conspirators in our collective liberation. And we have done that through inviting the people that we bail out into larger opportunities, into larger collective work, and also into leadership and political development opportunities, such as through a fellowship that we have been engaging them with for the past 2 years. It has really been a conduit for leadership and growth for our fellows and for our mamas, which have caused them to go on and lead bailouts of their own, which we're super excited about. And our third Our third strategic priority is thought leadership. And that's essentially to say that as Black people doing this work, we are the experts of our experience in this work, in that we also want to invite folks into the work with us by providing and creating resource materials, such as our toolkit, which some of the things that we'll be speaking to today will be referencing the toolkit, which lives on our website at nationalbailout.org, and also our curriculum, which is the Transformative Bail curriculum, which also lives on our website and gives a basic overview onto what bail and pretrial detention is. In these webinars, so these webinars really act as an invitation for all of you to be in community with us as we continue to fight against pretrial detention and mass criminalization, and to throw down and share skills and resources so we can do what we do for our collective liberation. So super excited for all of y'all to be here again, and really excited to be talking about comms, because that is a strong, an important part of our work. It is how we tell our stories, and it is how we put out and envision the world that we want to see. So really excited to be talking about that with y'all. So I am going to pass it to Shay, aka Shafida, who is representing BLM Memphis, to talk about the local comms work in Memphis and the strategies that they've utilized since 2017 to engage people in the work and to share about the work that they're doing.
Hey, y'all. So again, Shahida, you can call me Shay, she, her, Memphis, Tennessee. North Memphis is always appropriate. Throw your thumbs up. And so I think when I think about comms and the way the way that we've approached it, I think about it in like three. So I think it's, internally, the way that we talk amongst each other and the way that we plan to, how are we talking about the conversations, and then externally, the way that we put those conversations out in the world, and then the platform. So I think about, so I kind of think in terms of like, what is like narrative intervention, like what are the ways that we kind of place ourselves in the larger conversation or start a larger conversation, and that's press conferences, op-eds, if we can persuade a journalist to pick up a story or pitch a story around, what's going on in prisons, or to put a watch on the DA. So I think of that as a bucket. I think of social media as a bucket. And then I think in the different platforms and how we, navigate that. And so like for us, Facebook is a huge place where we convene folks and do a lot of our digital like organizing call to actions. And then Twitter is kind of just we just kind of throw shit in the space. So we need to get better about that. And then I think about like our like flyers and the assets that go along with both social media and things, the events and online fundraising, and how do we maintain like a consistent look and feel through that. And so normally we start by deciding if we're going to have a press conference, who we're going to invite locally. So we have a running list of local press. At this point, we've done it long enough. My recommendation is small press that is friendly, is better than random press that you have no idea that they're going to run. And also no press in the face of bad press. I don't believe that, I don't believe for our work that all press is good press. And locally, that has not worked out in our favor. And so thinking about that and whether or not to use the press conference at the beginning or the end, because everything isn't new. So what makes it different this time is always a thing we have to think about as we engage press. The longer we do use this tactic, like what are we doing this time that makes it new and fresh? And if we're going to do it at the end, like what new lesson we learned from this year's bailout, like how can we make this applicable to the work moving forward? But also, what's different about the way we approached it this year? Why is this still relevant in a way that doesn't contradict our previous messages, but it's not exactly the same thing over and over again? And so we think about that. how do we incorporate the most amount of folks? One thing is that, our page is the official Black Lives Matter Memphis page. Contrary to what Facebook says, they definitely suppress our ability to run ads, our ability to see or, reach people that are engaged. And so what is our strategy for sharing out information? And so I think about that in both what we are putting out and how we are asking folks to carry some of the work of that. Like, who is our working group that's going to be dedicated to sharing this out and tagging 10 friends or sending it through their email list? Who are our coalition partners? Like, how can we get this to the widest amount of people, knowing that there are restrictions? And thinking about that as we make our plan. And then how do we make it easy? Again, one of the things for me has been to create a set of templates that we use for each year. So there's a bundle graphic design that we do that will include, our Facebook covers, event flyers, fundraising flyers, contact us flyers, and we can just kind of drag and drop information as we need it using Canva, which is, we use the free account. We don't pay for it, though we pay for the graphic design. And then I think having a consistent, I tend to plan out what will be posted and kind of think about themes and days as a strategy for posting. So Mondays might be facts about bail. Wednesdays might be pictures, something, strong pictures that like evoke emotion. And then Fridays have been in the past one that's $5 Fridays, where we ask folks, donate $5, donate $5, $5 or more. And so like to have that consistent posting so we can schedule that out and make sure that there's also room for us to post about things that are happening in the moment, but there's like a consistent theme of what we're posting around bailouts and how those look. And that's, I think, pretty much it for what I have. Folks are welcome to ask questions from it.
Yes, thank you, Shay. And yes to $5 Fridays, like yes to that. I'm curious, like, especially since y'all been doing it for the past, since 2017, so since the beginning, I'm curious, like, what is shifting for y'all this year, especially in light of COVID-19, and just to keep people engaged, to support or to like even write about the work that y'all are doing in Memphis.
So two of the things that I think about, that I've been thinking about, one is we did issue some demands and we issued them specifically to our campaign. So we allow folks to engage around that process and to help push that out. I think another thing that we're thinking about differently is like, how do we preference the needs of mothers and caregivers in this time? Like, because we know that folks are, pregnant folks, we know that folks with health concerns and issues. And so I feel like this is the time to put a spotlight on what actually happens to folks who are in jail dealing with, I can't think of the name, but, like long-term disease, or health issues. So how is somebody dealing with diabetes in jail right now? How is somebody, how are we humanizing folks in their everyday struggles that folks on the streets are having issue with and highlighting that? So I think that's a thing that's unique to how we can present that this year. And I think just with all of the DA work and all of the, progressive prosecutorship that's going around, like how do we center abolition in this moment? How do we talk about like our demand is to free them all, and because not just low-level offenders, like so a conversation of what that looks like, while also being honest that us saying that we don't believe folks belong in cages also means that we don't believe that folks have done harm, and if there doesn't need to be some negotiation around what that looks like, but that we believe strongly that we can create the containers for that, and that there's work that's already being done around that. So uplifting that in this time too, I think are two, strong narrative interventions. And I know we talk a little bit about also for COVID related stuff. I think it's another way that we put highlights or an eye on how funding tends to like exploit grassroots work and uplift the language, but doesn't seem to follow the funding actually doesn't follow grassroots organizations. So I think that's another way, and another way we could potentially be using our fundraising and narrative strategy about like a little shame and a little pressure for folks. Where your money at in the time of this bailout work and this reform work? Like, where you actually spending your money and your coins, and send some of that over here.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for that, Shay. Thank you so much for that. I know that you aren't able to stay on for the whole time, so I do want to open it up to see if anyone has any specific responses or questions for you.
Okay.
So if y'all got any questions for Shay, now is the time. And y'all can put that in the chat box or raise your hands to do so. There's a question from Ruth about you going over the daily posts once again.
Okay. So I think it's important that you do like a calendar of like time your post out. And so you use a scheduling tool. You can actually schedule them through Facebook too. But if you have more than one site that you're managing, I think it's important to plan. And so it helps me to think about them in like given the day's themes. And it just goes back to me being old and like Flashback Friday and Throwback Thursday. Like, remember when it was like Motivation Monday? And so it helps me to plan content to keep it, relevant and tied to the bail work. And so I just pick a couple of days. And also because I can do that based on my capacity. If I have the ability to do and manage 3 days worth of content, sometimes, based on what's going on in our chapter and in the world and work, I might have the ability to manage 2 posts. So like you get to set it, but like being consistent around what that is, because you train your social media audience to respond in a certain way by putting that content out consistently. And so they start to look for it and engage around it, which kind of helps. If it's engaging content, it kind of helps beat the algorithm a little bit. But I think it also helps for planning and thinking ahead. And so you don't just kind of run out of steam.
Word. Thank you, Shay. We also have a question from Sam out of Free Black Mama CMV about whether or not you can share like a template for your calendar or schedule.
Child, it is literally just my Excel. I'm an old school, so it's not a Google spreadsheet. It is Excel, and it's a Monday, Wednesday, whatever the 3 days is, and I just plug content into there. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, we have a comms calendar that we can also share, and we can make that available to folks as well, like a template.
Yeah, because sometimes folks' comms calendar get real fancy for me, and I ain't real fancy. So.
Yes, do what works for you. Yes, yes. There's another question from a Starling around, do you use separate accounts on social or merge BLM with bailout posts? And I'm thinking, I don't know if Starling is speaking about MBO post or if you want to bring clarity, but if Shay, you understand that question, feel free to respond.
Yeah, that was my question, or do we definitely reshare all of the content from MBO. So if the question is, I'm not sure I understand that question. Yeah.
Starling, if you want to follow up with a clarifying question, that'll be helpful. Thank you. And then Miss Betty, hi Miss Betty, asked, Miss Betty from SC asks, given that we are not operating on bad press, should we stay with press we know as to be able to know how they're going to run it?
That's my recommendation. I'm also scarred because the first time we had a press conference, like I wasn't, me nor the folks that we had like out there were prepared for the like Channel 3 conservative newspaper to be like, but what about rapists, right? So I think what we did was we went with media that we knew, and at this point we kind of stay with the media that we've developed a relationship with. And then I made an intentional, after that first year, I did then try to make intentional relationships with our local media. So I reached out to like some of the, I don't forget what they're called, but they're not they're the freelance writers. And so reaching out to them, sitting down, like, what are y'all looking for? What perspectives, and kind of built a relationship so that even like some sites are just completely off target. I mean, like, we're not fucking with them at all, but we were able to develop relationships. But I do strongly suggest like it being friendly media for your bailouts, especially if it's at the kickoff. On the back end, I think you can get a little bit more flexibility, but at the start, I think it can be detrimental if you get a lot of negative press while you're kicking it off and trying to ask folks for money.
Word, thank you, Shay. And we're gonna, Miss Betty, we're gonna talk about that next around, just some more general do's and don'ts around press and the things. But thank you so much, Shay, for your time and all the work that you. Oh, Starlin said that they think that you answered it. They were asking if you had separate social media accounts for the bailout and BLM, but you said that you share MBO posts. So I think that's where. Thank you, Starlin. But thank you so much, Shay, for all the work that you are doing and for holding it down in Memphis and North Memphis.
Thank you too, Arissa. Thank y'all. I'm sorry I gotta go, but thank y'all.
Right. Cool. So we are going to pass it. So Shay gave us some local bailout strategies as folks that have been doing this in Memphis, and and as Shay talked about, like operating in a more conservative landscape and shifting landscape as well. But now we are going to zoom out a little bit to speak to some comms basics, and I'm going to pass it to Erica May from Color Change to take us through it. Hey, Erica.
Hi. Hey, y'all. Thank you for having me. I'm not sure my video is not on, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about, Shay just, sorry. I think a lot of what, Shay said, I agree with. So I feel like I'm going to reiterate some of the things that Shay shared. But yeah, as Larissa said, just want to talk to you about some comms basics. As you all know, the bailouts are an opportunity for you to educate the folks in your community about the cruelty of money bail and to ask folks to give their money or time to ending it. And so I just want to sort of talk about like what that process is like. I know Shay talked about it, kind of what my process is when we do comms. Just so you all know, Color of Change, we support national bailout with a lot of the public relations and media relations piece, especially around the bailouts. And so just sort of want to just share some of our approach and just things to think about when you're thinking about your local bailouts. And so first, of course, I think, any strategic plan starts with goals. And so I think it's important to make sure that you're keeping your larger campaign goals in mind when you're thinking about your bailouts and your communications and like when you're starting to develop your message and all of those things. And so always just in order to make sure comms is not just about amplification or, making noise, but it's really about figuring out, kind of pushing energy into strategic change, right? And so driving people to action, motivating people to action, whether that's giving or taking their time, like I said, to do something, to participate in action, or et cetera. And then after goals, I start to usually think about, and I think about my audiences, of course, so who we're trying to reach, and then tactics. I think a press release is like basic, like you should always send a press release, perhaps a media advisory. If you're doing bailouts and you want media to show up in person, I know we're in a really weird time right now with COVID, but you can still give the who, what, when, where, why. So who, what organizations are participating, the what, the bailouts, the when, the where, if there's a specific facility, and the why, just to let folks know that it's happening, just in case they want to show up. Or even with media in this environment, it may be that they want to call the facility and ask, and engage in a different way. But just kind of thinking about all of those things. And then other tactics, of course, events, press events, of course, with us all in the house. You can't do an in-person event, but you can do an online press event if you want to, if you feel like that, that it's a good way to sort of educate media. If you want to sort of give quotes, press events work well for visuals. And I would say like a press conference and stuff in front of a facility, a jail or prison would be dope for visuals. But I would say, I don't know that it's necessarily worth the lift in this environment to do that if you already have like a press release and you're able to pitch media. And then op-eds and then letters to the editor. Op-eds have been really hard to place, at least nationally and some locally lately with COVID. And I think just probably a lot of submissions. I think a lot of folks are submitting things, but locally I would, if you think an op-ed makes sense, I would try one. It could make sense to talk about, especially in this environment, to talk about how COVID is, usually one night in jail can cost you your job and housing and all these things, but with COVID, it can really cost you your life. And I think that's a really important point to make. And so an op-ed, a powerful op-ed, an op-ed could be useful there and sort of making that point and kind of bringing people to that, kind of pushing influence and policymakers to do some of these mass releases. And then if not op-eds, letters to editors. I feel like there's a lot of press around COVID in jails and prisons. And so there might be opportunities to just reply to an article. Letter to an editor is shorter than an op-ed. An op-ed usually is like 600 to 750 words, whereas a letter to the editor is usually about 200 to 250 words. And it's just pithy, like a response. And a lot of times it's easier to place. They can be easier to place. And so after thinking about tactics, kind of thinking about your talking points, again, keeping your audience in mind. When I think about talking points, I have like a little formula that I kind of have in my head where I start with the problem and then kind of flesh out the problem. Like with stats and stories are always more powerful than stats. But figures can be important too. Like one of my favorite national figures to share is that 2.3 million people are incarcerated in this country, and almost a third of them are being held pretrial. They haven't even had their day in court. They haven't been convicted of anything, and that's like something that's actually makes people think like, well, damn, really, when we think about mass incarceration. So facts and figures can be powerful, but thinking about what stats maybe locally are really powerful for you. I don't think we're doing COVID-related bailouts in Ohio, but just thinking about like how Ohio has the largest number of known COVID-related cases amongst incarcerated people. And so that could be a powerful statistic, but thinking about local statistics that might be particularly powerful for your local audience. And then stories, right? Stories of who's impacted, right? By, and what it means for somebody to be incarcerated in this moment, for mamas and caregivers to be incarcerated in this moment. And then the solution or the call to action would be the last part of your message. And so again, like Shay said, keeping that abolitionist frame, I think is really important. That free them all is that's kind of our call right now. And just sort of making the point that like these bailouts don't let policymakers off the hook, like we need full releases of folks. And like Shay was saying, not just folks who have, committed nonviolent offenses, et cetera. The next thing to think about is spokespeople. And so who are your messengers and who are the most effective messengers, who are powerful, who are going to resonate, who have the stories to share, those types of things. And so just be thinking about, again, and I think once you're thinking about your audience and, your talking points and what stories you want to make sure to tell and what your message is, I think it's easy to kind of figure out who the best messengers are from there. And then you'll want to build your media list. And so thinking about who, like Shay said, I think you definitely don't want to actively attract opposition media. It's not helpful to your, it's just not helpful to have opposition talking about stories and being oppositional to these to our actions and to our efforts. but when you're doing a media list, if you don't already have relationships with local press, you should probably start with Google, just doing a search of your local paper and seeing who has written about criminal justice issues, kind of seeing how they've written about them. Criminal legal issues, sorry. But how they've written about them. Yeah, and just sort of getting a sense if there are other groups that have written about, just sort of get a sense of who in your local outlets are even covering the topic. And then also if you don't have a list, there are always, I'm sure you have partner organizations locally that can also just sort of let you know like who some of the reporters that might be good to talk to are. Sorry, I was trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about media list. I feel like there's something else, but I'll come back to it if it occurs to me. And then I think the social media plan is important, of course. And Shay, I feel like talked a lot about this. I love the weekly plan. I love some $5 Fridays. That's a great idea. But making sure that you have a plan that includes graphics. Shay mentioned Canva is a great free resource and tool that you can make graphics pretty easily with. And so, yeah, I feel like Shay talked a lot about social media, so I'm not gonna reiterate all of that. And I think the next piece is just getting your squad together, getting your team together, making sure that you have someone to coordinate press and to sort of be that contact line on the press release, somebody that folks can reach out to help coordinate folks and wrangle folks. Making sure you have your social media team, somebody who's actually planning your calendar and developing your graphics and planning to post and all those things. Yeah. And then, of course, as your bailouts are happening, you just want to make sure you're documenting everything. And so not really sure what that looks like in this moment, to be honest. Maybe Steve has ideas when he talks about that. He speaks a little bit later, but to the extent that you can, you want to make sure you're documenting and sharing with folks online, on socials, but also like if there are media that you're in contact with and there are somehow you're able to capture visuals in this climate, you definitely want to share those with them as well so that they can use them in their stories. And so those are the basic. I do have some do's and don'ts. And so in terms of like how to think about messaging, and I talked a little bit about that before, but inspire interest, you want to invite people in, you want to make a connection, and then you want to gear up for more information later. You don't want to explain process, you don't want to convey complicated or nuanced ideas. I talked about facts and figures versus stories. You definitely want to keep facts and figures to a minimum. That's not what people connect with. People connect with stories. And so, but if there are powerful facts and figures that you feel like will resonate with your audience, you should share them and see. During interviews with spokespeople, and so, sorry, just one thing I want to say about spokespeople that I just didn't mention earlier, but when you help them develop their talking points, again, like help folks think about their stories and develop talking points around their stories, I think it makes the process of talking to media less intimidating. And I think it helps people stay on message. It's intimidating. Arissa and I have been doing the national interviews for National Bailout, and sometimes they ask you poignant questions and you're just like, what's happening? So just make sure depending on who your spokespeople are, I definitely recommend if there's a mama that has previously bailed out who's willing to speak, that's always a powerful person. But depending on who they are, they may not have, this may be their first time, or they may not have much experience speaking with media. So just make sure that you're prepared, they have talking points. If you ever want to try to do a mock interview with them, that's a good idea. Just kind of making sure that we're setting them up for success. And so with spokespeople, during the interview, just some do's and don'ts in your interviewing. Always make your most important points first. This is especially important for broadcasts like TV and radio, because sometimes you get cut off before you want to make your points. And so you always want to make your most important points first. Keep your answers short and pithy. Stick to sound bites and repeat them. Don't ever be afraid of repeating yourself, repeating a message. And then use stories, as I've said over and over again, I feel like, and make it personal. Do not use jargon. Don't speak off the record unless you feel like sometimes it's necessary, but most of the time it's not necessary. So just know that anything you say on the record will be printed. So just make sure that you're aware of that. You know, do not lie or exaggerate, and do not say, try not to say no comment. And in terms of, and a lot of this applies more to broadcast interviews, but also when you're talking to reporters, just a couple of things. So you should flag to emphasize your message. So for example, if they're saying something like, if there's one thing you should know, or the most important thing here is, or the bottom line is, that usually foreshadows or forecasts something like, that folks need to kind of lean into and pay attention to when talking. You want to practice bridging to get back to your message. And so if a reporter somehow, especially if you somehow are talking to unfriendly media, right, they might try to throw you off of your message. And so you just want to just come back. The real issue here is, or to me, the real question is, or, you know, that question reminds me of a story about, and kind of get back to message. Remember, I think one thing when interviewing, it's important to know is like, I don't want to say the reporter's questions don't matter. Like they really don't. You don't necessarily need to answer the question. You need to make your points, get your points across. And sometimes that just means kind of pivoting out of it. And so those are really good phrases to kind of do that, to help do that. And then reframing is the other point, which I was in, sort of moving questions back into your frame. So sort of taking the kernel of a question and using it to share your message. And so if there's like I can't think of I'm really bad at thinking of examples off the top of my head, so I apologize. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, stay on message, know your message, stay on message, and kind of bring things back when you need to bring them back. And don't feel like you have to go down, when you're interviewing with a reporter, don't feel like you have to go down any path you don't want to go down, if that makes sense. A reporter asked me about me being an abolitionist and what that meant the other day, and I just honestly was not ready to talk. Like I wasn't ready for the question. I wasn't ready to talk about it. I wasn't ready to be quoted on it. Wasn't like, it was just all the things. I just wasn't ready for it. And so I can't remember how I pivoted, but I definitely just pivoted out of it without saying, hey, we can talk about that off the record, because I'm not exactly sure how I want to be in print on that. Although I'm an abolitionist till I die, but I also represent several people when I interview. So yeah, I feel like that's it for me.
Yes, thank you for that thorough breakdown. I'm curious if folks have any questions for Erica. Our folks are busy and booked and busy, so we'll need to hop tonight, but just wanted to see if there's any specific questions based on all of the information that Erica just shared. I think I had a clarifying question. You talked about a media advisory. So is there a difference between a media advisory and a press release?
Yes, great question. Yes, a media advisory will usually just alert media to, it's used for events a lot of times, but you kind of alert them to, they're very simple. It says maybe one line about these groups are going to do this thing. That's the what. And it's usually just a quick who, what, when, where. And the why is, I guess, that opening paragraph about like why something's happening, and then the who, what, where. And so that can be, so I've used, usually when I do media advisories, it's before an event. And so like if we were doing in-person bailouts for sure, I would suggest a media advisory maybe a week ahead of time to send the media to get people there if you want them there. So any in-person event, if you want folks there, press conference, whatever. And then sending an actual press release that will include quotes, be fleshed out a little bit more on the day of or the day before the event.
Word, thank you. And then Medusa, hey Medusa, who's in bailouts, holding it down in Pennsylvania, and doing bailouts for the first time this year in Pittsburgh, is asked if they should only target Black media outlets for their press conference.
I don't think you need to only target Black media outlets. I think any media outlets you can target. I feel like you want to make sure, again, that you're not targeting like conservative, someone who's gonna trash you and just put you through unnecessary BS for no reason. Yeah, I don't think it has to be limited to Black. I think in this moment, a lot of people are talking about COVID in prisons and jails. And so I think there's an opportunity I feel like a lot of people will be interested. And there's an opportunity to get your story anywhere. Yeah, so I would say like in Pittsburgh specifically, I think it's the Gazette something or whatever. Like I would say definitely you want to go for your local mainstream paper as well.
Word, thank you. Do folks have any additional questions for Erica May? Cool. And as a reminder, these recordings will be available to y'all, and we'll send it out. And folks can always reach out to us at our info@nationalbailout.org email, and we can definitely make sure to follow up and to connect folks as well. So appreciate you, Erica, for sharing this. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So now we are going to pass it to Delane, who is a coworker and staff here with us at National Bailout, who's going to talk about just like our messaging, the messaging that we've used, the messaging that is powerful and speaks most to our work, and also the messaging shifts that we've had in light of the Rona. And like particularly, you know, as Erica shared, Freedom All has been a hashtag and a rallying cry for folks to be released and like all folks to be released. And we, as a collective of abolitionist organizers, definitely believe in the need to freedom all, and in that recognize our continuous eye and centering of Black mamas and caregivers who we know are often left out of the narratives, the solutions, and the strategies. So going to pass it over to Delane Powerful to talk about the powerful messaging, which was corny, but you know, powerful. There's that.
But I love it. Thanks, Marissa. Hey y'all, my name is Delane, like Marissa said. I use they, them pronouns, and I do operations at National Bailout. And like Marissa said, I'm gonna move us through some messaging to help inform why National Bailout does these bailouts, and also to be clear on our politic and our values with some quick talking points. But before that, I want to reference our Mama's Day toolkit. I think we might drop in the chat. So this is a COVID-19 bailout comms toolkit that provides language to folks for social media platforms, for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram we have on there, regarding the COVID-19 rapid response bailouts, and also links donation pages and webinar registration links. And we just encourage folks to use this when amplifying our work, and also just gives some really good sample language for anyone who's doing their own bailouts to just be in alignment with how we are talking about these Free Black Mamas COVID-19 bailouts. So as Marissa named, there are 7 or 8 talking points that I want to move us through, and these are going to be recorded so you can follow up and get these again. But again, just to be in alignment and to really share our collective vision as to why we're doing this work. So the first is, this is a vision that is rooted in the history of Black liberation, where enslaved Black ancestors used their collective resources and purchased each other's freedoms before slavery was abolished. Until we abolish money, bail, and mass incarceration, we have to free ourselves. And so when we talk about our work, when we want it to be understood that we are following in a very, very long line, a very, very long tradition of buying our freedom, and that this is nothing new to Black folks, and that our ancestors' labor and love and legacy continues to be actualized through the work of National Bailout, and that we're continuing to free generations of our people through this work. Our second is, second talking point, we are bailing out Black mothers, including queer, transgender, young, elder, and mothers who may not have physically given birth. So with National Bailout, our understanding of Black mamahood and caregiving extends far past society's construction. I recently just Googled mothers, and when you Google mothers, what comes up is majority white, late 20s, early 30s, presumably straight, cis, able-bodied people, and National Bailout is not invested or interested in this. Our mamas and caregivers are, again, they're queer, transgender, young, and elder, and this includes teen moms, this includes house mothers thinking about our family in the ballroom scene, it includes all of us. Another talking point, Black motherhood should be, and that follows along in this, Black motherhood should be inclusive and not solely defined by birth or biology. Historically, always and continually, Black women have taken care and raised communities. And again, just Black mamas and caregivers means many things. It's not biological. We are not only speaking about the folks who have ability to give birth. Another talking point is that this day of action is really about uniting Black mothers across gender and sexual orientation to the communities that they have built for themselves. We know that Black moms and caregivers play a much larger economic role in their families. We know that putting Black moms and caregivers in jail is also a part of the separation of families that we see happening. Our comrades, Baji, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, we also do connect with them to bail out undocumented moms and caregivers, because we know that this intersection of gender and race and citizenship status puts our people at a higher risk of marginalization. So just emphasizing that our people deserve to be with their families, our people deserve to not be punished for being poor, for being Black, for being undocumented, for being queer, for being trans. Another talking point is bail is another tool to capitalize on the pain of Black communities. Black people are often accused and put in cells based on discriminatory and racially biased policies and monitoring. Cash bail and pretrial detention often keeps Black people in cells because of their inability to pay. Again, Black bail is another tool to capitalize on the pain of Black communities. It's really as simple as that. Another talking point that we're moving through and asking folks to help amplify is, as a result of this action in 2017, which was the first year we did our bailouts, many of the cities that bailed out Black moms and caregivers from jail are engaged in active campaigns to end money bail and challenge the court systems in their area. We have a lot of local partners who have been using these bailouts as a tactic to push their local campaigns, who have experienced a lot of success. We have folks who have used these bailouts to start their own bail funds in their local communities. And we at National Bailout, through our bail trackers and our operation committee calls and all these things, we use these bailouts to really pull data and get an accurate and up-to-date read on what's moving in the jails and the prisons, courthouses, and everywhere else. So again, we're just really using these bails as a strategic tactic to end money bail, pretrial detention, mass criminalization. And the way that we do that is by these campaigns that our folks are pushing forward. And our last two talking points that I want to move through are directly connected to our COVID-19 response bailouts. So our first being society's instinct, even in the midst of global crisis, is to continue criminalizing and punishing folks, especially Black people, under the guise of public health. We have been seeing this everywhere. I am based in Chicago, and just the other day, a Black man was charged with an assault of a police officer for coughing. Out, supposedly in the direction of the police officer, who wasn't social distancing themselves, I guess. And I also heard about in Virginia, there's a law that it's illegal to wear masks that cover your entire face, which is interesting. But at the same time, we are now seeing that because of COVID-19, folks are being required and mandated to wear masks. And so Black folks in particular have already been and are continuing to be penalized for having to decide which mandate or law to follow, because both of these laws are out to get Black folks. And the last COVID-19 response talking point that we've been moving, and you'll see a lot over social media, is you can't practice social distancing in a cage. Cages are becoming epicenters for COVID-19, and allowing people to stay there is a death sentence. Allowing folks to stay in cages at any point and in this time is a death sentence. And so many places have supposedly gotten rid of the death sentence, but we know that's not true, that putting someone in a cage, putting someone in solitary confinement and more is a death sentence. And just how can we expand our lens on what a death sentence actually means, even if it's not immediate? And there's been this excuse of, well, if we release all these folks from cages, then they won't have shelter, they won't have food, they won't have some semblance of health insurance, of health care that they get in these jails and prisons, and that being reason enough for them to stay in during this pandemic. And that's not okay, because again, we know that it's a death sentence, you can't socially distance, and it's spreading like rapid, like wildfire within these places. So those are the talking points that we want to offer up to y'all to really be engaging and using in your work. And also just to be in line with like this abolitionist politic. And yeah, we encourage y'all to use this in your work, and also to support our work in getting as many folks free as possible, to push using this language to help push your elected officials to decarcerate the jails. We've been seeing that happen all across the country, and it's been really, really dope how that's been moving. And also we said a lot of language around just like Black mamahood, Black mamas and caregivers, and why we are centering Black mamas and caregivers and who those people are. And that is really important, because we're also seeing at this time that it seems that there are a lot more men's facilities and women's facilities in that binary that are being decarcerated, which is, as Arissa was naming earlier, just deeply seeped in misogyny. So to be really critical with your language around that as well. Yeah. That's what I got.
Yes, thank you, Delane. Thank you for grounding us in our politic, in the words and language that we use to capture and reflect who we are. We already have a question from Sarah Nixon, who says that they hear you and appreciate the lack of emphasis on cis heteronormative motherhood as a prerequisite to being bailed out and being a part of Black Mama's Bailout. And just to clarify, is a requirement that those who seek your services have identifiable dependents. Maybe more broadly, how do those in need of bail assistance demonstrate the necessary qualifications, and what are those qualifications? And then they go on to thank us for the work that, well, thank you, but I'm gonna also be like, oh, us. But thank you specifically for your continued work on this and thorough explanation. And yeah, they just want to understand and broadcast the vision. So I think the question specifically is, in order for folks to be able to be bailed out, do they have to have an identifiable dependence? Although we recognize that we are not bailing, mamahood is expansive, in that we're not just bailing out birth and biological mothers, is the requirement still like to have an identifiable dependent? And what is the necessary qualifications, if any?
Yeah, the answer I believe is no. You don't need to have identified dependence. We're not tracking people down. We're not trying to like assess the validity of what they're saying and what their truths are. We're just trusting that our people are naming a need, and we're going to fill that need in whatever ways that are possible. And so the folks who are doing the belts on the ground have been identifying these Black mamas and caregivers through. Some of them have like hotlines, phone lines that folks can call and be like, I have this mom or caregiver that needs to be bailed out. Bet, cool, got you. Let me find out some information, how much their bail is, where they are, and we'll start that work to get them out. Some folks get referrals from public defenders or referrals from community, right? And so, no, there's no need to question our people, to try to find validity and truth in what they're saying. Once there's an expressed need about a person who is caring for people or who is mothering people in whatever way that looks like, our responsibility is to find a way to get them and to bring them home.
Yes. And I would also just like add to that like, you know, when we first created Black Mama's Bailout, the intention behind like saying Black mamas and caregivers into naming that we are not talking about birth and biological mamas was because we know that, especially in our communities, so in Black communities, that like we've always like our relationships and dynamics have always been very queer and like existed outside of cis heteronormativity. So we always had other mothers and aunties and cousins and whomever lived down the block that have cared for us and have nurtured us into who we are. So like in honor of that, in honor of like all the ways that we've shown up and all the people who have been responsible for our raising, we like no, like nobody verifying whether that you have a dependent. And we also know the way that like socioeconomics are set up is that Black folks always got a goddamn dependent.
Right.
Right? Like the way that we, I don't want to go into like the whole economics thing, but like the way that we know that like, wealth moves and operates, and like that a dollar for a Black person is not a dollar for the same dollar for a white person, is because that Black people usually have to take care of other people. Right? So yes to all of that. And
And, and to ask that, I just think about all the different types of government assistance where folks are applying for financial assistance, but have to, or even like taxes, right? We have to name dependent, but the folks who we are supported, who can even be, I have friends and family that I have friends that I also am financially support, right? And so and that wouldn't be counted in a form of dependency because of how the state defines like family and community. So we just, as I was saying, we just want to really expand what that looks like, and knowing that Black folks everywhere have people that depend on them, that we are supporting, that our dollar is not divided up by the people who are in our homes, but people who extend far past that.
Yes. So we have two more questions. Our second question comes from Meredith, and they are asking, well, they're saying that it's definitely disgusting excuse to argue that social services will not be available, thus people shouldn't be bailed out. However, it is important to consider what release people will do. There's limited ability for income, and you mentioned things like shelter and health insurance. What are the proposals for addressing these concerns? How much is Black Mamas able to help and work within the existing? How much is Black Mamas able to help and work within existing systems? I'm not clear about that last question, Meredith, but Celine, if you are, feel free to respond.
Yeah, I think I understand. So, or parts of the question. For all of the folks that we've been able to grant funds to do these bailouts, we've been asking them, do you have housing available for the folks you bail out? Do you have the ability to get them groceries for a couple of weeks? Do you have the ability to get them to testing centers if they need testing centers? And what we've been seeing is that folks are having difficulty, but there are also places that are stepping up. There are folks who have connections with hotels that are like, will allow your people to come in and stay indefinitely. We also have been having folks who have a lot of money, who have houses just lying around, empty, offering their empty space that their wealth bought them, for us to be connecting our local organizations with to get these mamas home. So we understand that it's also a disservice to bail someone out and just leave them to their own device for them to like figure things out on their end. And a part of the funding that we give is towards supportive services to help organizers, to help local organizations figure out, okay, I did this whole needs assessment. These are the things that people need. If this person can't go home, where's another place that they can go? And how does the funds that we get help support that? But also, who are the people in our network who have, for example, again, extra houses just lying around empty, that we can tap into and have our people there. So that's something that we've been moving through. And as for the health insurance, we also have been trying to connect with movement medical providers, folks who can, for one, write doctor's notes for the people we bail out so they can go get those COVID-19 testing if they need or want to, but also as a way to, again, just like provide other different types of health and wellness to the folks we bail out. So we definitely understand that there's a need, and people need things, and we've been trying to figure out really creative ways to get those things. And it often comes from folks like Al who are on this call who reach out to us and be like, I have this. How can I help? How can I just like provide this for y'all without anything needed from us, honestly?
Yes, thank you for that, Doreen. And yeah, just the ground, and like most of the folks we bailed out, as I named at the beginning of the call, over 400 people, and 75% of those folks we provided supportive services to, which range from housing to childcare, to support with like rehabilitation. So that's definitely a necessary component of our work, and it's definitely more critical now than ever, because we are living in a crisis that is the coronavirus. So it is part of the strategy is that when people are bailed out, they have somewhere to go. And we also just I just want to highlight the contradictions of the state. I know people walking around without insurance right now. Like, right? Like we don't have a a real infrastructure that is meant to care for people. We don't have a real infrastructure that is meant to hold people, which is why people are, in the crisis of poverty and houselessness and things like that. So yes, looking at Steve's comment of one time to the support services and the support system outside of the formal economy, right? Like we are operating outside of the formal economy because we have to, because the formal economy is not actually doing their job, which is why when we look out and we read the news, we see what is happening. So yes to that. And then there's one more question from Ruth about that they're being part of an organization that decided rather late that they wanted to bail out Black mamas. And they're just starting fundraising. Their organization would want to move the bailout to Juneteenth. Yeah, I mean, go ahead. We, are always out here, especially if y'all are, bailing out Black mamas and caregivers in support of that and want to always be in a posture of invitation. And so we invite folks to bail people out, right? To operate in this spirit for our collective liberation. So yes to doing that. Yes to doing it on Juneteenth. We love Juneteenth. So yeah, if there's any specific needs that y'all have to do that work for Juneteenth, please holler at us and we'll put that contact info in the chat at the end of the call. But yes, Ruth. And now I am going to move us along. We have been here for an hour. We deeply appreciate your presence during this call. So I'm going to move us to our comms with Steve Pargett of Militia Design to talk us through just style and messaging and how National Bailout as a brand stay fly, to be honest.
Hey everyone, good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. I just shared a link in the chat box. That will give you access to the free Black Mama Style and Messaging Guide. My daughter is joining me out here. Say hello, Sahar. Okay, I have to keep talking, okay?
Hi, Sahar.
So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to walk you all through relatively quickly the free Black Mama Style and Messaging Guide. Okay, so I just shared a link. I'm also going to share my screen for folks who are just not in a place to be able to open up an extra document. So this is a document that we put together, and it is because we are in a very unique and interesting and amazing position, whereas the Free Black Mamas campaign and the way that National Bailout works is extremely unique. We have Arissa and Delane on the call right now, who are the leadership for National Bailout. And National Bailout is composed of multiple organizations around the country that all organize different campaigns in different places to free Black mamas, provide supportive services, and all of the amazing things that you all have been hearing about so far. And also each year, the Free Black Mamas campaign, where we bail Black mamas and caregivers out, is open to whomever is bold enough, brave enough, connected enough, or just has the determination to free Black mamas. So the reason that we have this free Black Mama Style and Messaging Guide is everybody's invited, but we want everything to come together. If you're doing a bailout in Hawaii, we want it to look just like, or at least reminiscent in some way. We want the thing that's happening in Minnesota and the thing that's in Hawaii and the thing that's in California and the stuff that's coming through the National Bailout Twitter and Instagram account to all seem like they're part of the same family. So relatively quickly, I'm going to go through this style and messaging guide. I just provided you all a link to this so that you can see this. So this guide, you can spend more time with it outside of this call. It should be really useful. I hope so, because we spent time on it, specifically thinking that let's make something useful. So it's going to go through talking points, which Delane did a fantastic job of going through talking points already, so I'm going to skip that. But I am going to zoom in on how to properly attribute National Bailout, because we're really serious about that. It really matters to us. And then talk a little bit about typography design and just the branding in general. Sound good? I'm assuming that you're all nodding yes. I'm just going to keep going. Cool. Thanks for the thumbs up and the affirmation, Marissa. What is Free Black Mamas? Free Black Mamas is an annual campaign by the National Bailout Collective that seeks to raise awareness about the human and financial cost of money bail and emphasizes impact on Black mothers and caregivers. Every year since 2017, we've been doing these bailouts. So a Black Mama's bailout are the bailouts that we're doing around Mother's Day. National Bailout is the collective that leads on this campaign, okay? So I'm gonna move us forward. We've passed through the talking points. Okay, so this section is very important. All right, y'all, we're really serious about this. Since I'm just gonna give you a backstory here, if you're new to the Free Black Mamas campaign, if you're new to National Bailout, the people that are a part of this organization have started and sparked a movement around bail reform in this country. Back in 2017, when it was decided that we would free Black mamas from jail and cages so that they could be home with their families, this was a groundbreaking, radical new idea, and then people started doing bailouts everywhere. So for everybody so what that means is that it was the right strategy, it was the right thing to do, and also it's very important to us that everybody that's rocking with us, everybody that's using our resources, everybody that's using our talking points, that we are all representative of a collective and that you all properly attribute National Bailout. And if you're doing a campaign in a particular place, there's plenty of room for you to be extremely clear that your organization is leading on the bailout, but it's very important to us that you also say, hey, we're a part of the National Bailout movement. This is a part of the Free Black Mamas campaign, which is a national campaign. So there's some tips that are in here about how to properly attribute NBO and participate. So National Bailout is a collective, not an organization. Acceptable shorthand for National Bailout is NBO, not NBOC, not NBOPP, anything else. It's National Bailout is a collective, NBO is shorthand. Hashtag Free Black Mamas is the campaign. It should be spelled hashtag Free Black Mamas. There's a capital F, a capital B, a capital M. This is the hashtag that we would like you all to use. When you use this hashtag, it is very helpful for a person who is in your city, that's in your neighborhood, that sees what's going on, to see that you all are connected to a national movement. If the person in the crew that's in Hawaii, in Minnesota, I don't know why I keep saying Hawaii, in Minnesota, in Atlanta, in California, in Miami, if everybody's using that same hashtag, that's what helps this to feel as big as it really is. We're not trying to make it look bigger than it is. We're trying to actually show what's going on. And this is a beautiful thing that's happening. So it's very important that you're using this hashtag Free Black Mamas, okay? A Black Mamas bailout is a name of any bailout that happens as a part of the Free Black Mamas campaign. These can be planned by NBO or by people and organizations who volunteer to fundraise and host a Black Mamas bailout for the campaign that both amplifies and aligns with our vision and values. Black Mamas bailout should be spelled, Black Mamas bailout, I had spelled there, not without an apostrophe, not with the apostrophe after the S, et cetera, et cetera. This is a stickler thing from our messaging crew here, but we're just trying to be really prescriptive so that there's things that you don't have to worry about. Mama. So mama is a term that encompasses Black cis and trans women, femmes and gender nonconforming people who mother and care for their families and communities in various ways. This term is not limited to birth mothers and those who portray motherhood through a cisgender straight lens. Delane talked about this. Arissa talked about this. I'm just also reinforcing that this is what it means when we say mama. Black should always be capitalized. When we're talking about Black as an identity, it should be capitalized, okay? So that's how you properly attribute National Bailout as you're participating in the Free Black Mamas campaign. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about aesthetically, through your design and through the promotion and the things that you all are pushing out locally, how you visually make sure that the campaign that you're doing aligns with National Bailout. Okay, so this is the National Bailout logo. NBO, the heart is used as the B, is shorthand for National Bailout. And then also this heart is the icon that we have settled on. We went through a really beautiful process with a lot of people to land on this. And that heart is really important to us. Usage of the heart connects to previous iterations of the National Bailout branding, because we've been using the heart in some sort of way since 2017. And the heart represents a love that our people have as they collect resources and use them to bail our people out of jail, and reinforces that the act of bailing out is an act of radical love, okay? So we want to encourage you all to use this heart in your designs. We recognize that you all have your own organizational logos, but the heart itself is one of those key icons that you can use that helps connect things back to National Bailout. If you're on the other side of the screen right now, like, hey, we don't have graphic designers, I don't know what you're talking about, don't worry, I got something for you soon. But this is just guidelines for folks that do have communications teams and are gonna be doing some custom like artwork, design, and messaging as a part of the campaign. So this is a tag design. This is something that you can easily download and throw on a flyer that shows that you're a part of the Free Black Mamas campaign along with the rest of the crew. So this is one of the ways that you can mark your work and show that you're rolling with us. And this is the color palette that we use. So, you know, folks that are designers, if there's somebody on your team that's not you, that is a designer, they'll understand how to use this. And this is basically the specific color codes that they would use to line up with the aesthetics and everything else that we're going to be pushing out. Cool? Cool. Here are some fonts. These are the main fonts that we use. Okay. Great. I'm going to skip over this section because we're going to be sharing some social media toolkits with you, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But everybody, I shared the link to the style and messaging guide. And this is maybe not the most important, but top 2 most important parts of it. Everything that I just talked about in terms of the fonts, the logo for National Bailout, the heart icon, and all those different pieces are accessible by clicking this link. This link will lead you to a Google document, a Google folder that has all of this stuff available for you. So you can just grab it and go. This link will also, so you're gonna find a lot of stuff there that's gonna be super useful. Use the link if one of the questions was, oh wow, this makes a lot of sense, but we don't know how to get to this stuff. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen there. That's my quick go through of the style and messaging guide. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll clean it up, no problem. All right, sorry about that, y'all. I am here. I see some questions flowing in. So I'm going to actually just keep rolling with a couple of other pieces for the agenda that I was going to go through, and then I can come back for any questions that relate to all of that stuff, okay? Okay, so as we are, 2 things to talk about is basically the social media toolkits, and also if you do not have a design team, how you can lean on National Bailout to help you out with the design and the things that you're going to need. So I'm going to share my different part of my computer situation with you all right here. We recognize that everybody that's doing a bailout isn't equipped with a communications team that also has a designer. But the National Bailout Collective does have a crew of people that's working on their creative. That is Militia Design. I'm leading that team. And what we do every year is that we make sure that there's a really clear and easy process for you to be able to request things from us. It's another way that we're able to, so essentially what we do is we create template graphics that can be used by you all the organizers. You're going to fill out a Google form if you need that stuff. It's going to ask you various questions about your organization. What's the name of the organization? Who's the contact person? When are you going to be doing bailouts? Maybe a couple of questions about the bailouts, and then which materials that you would need. So this year is a little bit different than years in the past because we are actively dealing with a global pandemic. That means that people should stay inside of it. So the different materials that we offer is something that we're finalizing this week. But on Monday, you're going to receive a social media toolkit as well as a link to fill out a Google form where you can request different design materials. Maybe you're wondering what I'm talking about when I say design materials. So I'm actually going to show you a previous year. Essentially, this is a folder where there was about 10 different organizations that requested this artwork for us. So what we do is we create template designs for different things, and then we'll send those over to you all. In the past, this is a 3-foot by 10-foot banner that will do the design, and you'd be able to just take it directly over to a FedEx copy center or whatever your local printer. And then social media graphics for different social networks. This is also like a business cards that we designed before. This is something that people requested. So essentially it's like we're creating template designs, and we will do the labor of creating these things for you all to essentially be your ad hoc design team inside the specific lane of the template things that we're offering. In the past, we offered things that were more about like having a larger demonstration outside. Some folks are doing press conferences, so it made sense to have a banner. It made sense to have business cards and things like that. My intuition says that this is going to be more about making sure that folks are able to have a great presence on social media to talk about the work that we're doing, because we're not going to be spending too much extra time outside. But you all will be receiving this form at the top of next week. It will either come from Arissa or Delane, or we will get that email list and send it to you all directly. I encourage you to fill out the form. We'll need to have your information in response next week so that we'll have time to turn this stuff around for you all. But we are also happy to help. Okay. Oh, Miss Betty. I love Miss Betty. And the last piece that I was going to go through is that we are also creating social media toolkits. Starting on Monday, we're going to have weekly social media toolkits that we're sending at the beginning of every week that essentially will have sample graphics and sample social media posts for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram that you all can use to basically help to push the overall messaging and narrative of the national bailout movement this year. So you all can look out for that as well. There was something that Erica brought up a little bit earlier on the call where she was talking about documentation. What I will say is that any sort of documentation that you all are able to do is helpful. Last year was certainly a different situation, but it was really beautiful. It was really beautiful that we were able to share photos and videos of folks that were in DC and in California and all these different places around the country. And as much as we're able to tell the story of what's going on around the country, we really want to be able to do that. So I would encourage you all to, as much as possible, document what your bailout looks like, particularly this year as we're dealing with COVID-19 and the way that this might complicate it and make it even harder for folks to do the bailouts. We really want to tell the stories. We want to tell the story of what it looks like to do a bailout in these sorts of conditions. We want to tell the story of the conditions that our folks are under. And as much as possible, we want to tell the story of the local context of the city that you're in, the way that the system is impacting your people. And, you know, folks come to the national bailout account to get a read of what's going on around the country. So the more that you all are able to communicate with us about what it looks like with you all, the more that you all are able to share photos and video with us, the better that we're going to be able to tell the national story. So yeah, cool. I'm gonna go to the Q&A. All right. These from Sarah and Meredith for me, y'all.
Yeah. Oh, no, they weren't for you.
Okay.
But thank you so much, Steve. That was hella thorough and important in how we stay fly. So thank you for.
Cool.
Do folks have any questions or curiosities for Steve?
Yeah, there was a asking for contact info, but I believe you dropped it.
Yeah. So Steve just shared his email address.
Word.
You can't open the messaging guide. The messaging guide.
Okay. Can somebody else try that link and see if it works? I have the sharing settings set that anybody can find and view it, the document. It worked for me. Alita, if you want to drop your email in the document, then in the chat, then I can email you the messaging guide, the style guide. It doesn't let you download any of the images. Ah, I see. Okay, so I'm understanding that the links at the end are the ones that folks are having a hard time with. So I'm just going to double check the sharing permissions for each of those to make sure that anybody with the link is able to reach them.
Cool. Word. We got an email from, a message from someone asking the best way to connect with groups. I'll put my email in here, both myself and Delaine's email, so we can connect with you regarding Octavia. Thank you for that offering, Octavia, about housing places. So Delane and myself would put our email in here so you can directly connect with us about where the housing is, and we can make connections. Cool. Thank you again. So there's some questions around just downloading things. Tina said that they can download the images from Google Drive, but not the images from the style and messaging guide. But the Google Drive, from my understanding, there's a Google Drive link in which you are supposed to download the images from. Is that correct, Steve? Yes. So I think that's what is supposed to be happening, Tina. Are there any other questions or thoughts? And I'd like to just shout out our panelists today. So Steve from Militia Design, Delane, who is our wonderful operations person at National Bailout, Sahar, who has made a guest appearance, Erica from Color of Change, and Shay from BLM Memphis, all for sharing their wisdoms and insights about comms and making sure that we are able to thoroughly and accurately tell our stories in ways that reflect the work that we do. So yes, thank all of you. Thank you, Ms. Betty, for all the affirmations and just flyness that you bring. And so we have another one next week. We're going to talk about advocacy. We're going to hear more from local organizers about how they've been leveraging their bailouts in their local fights. So stay tuned, same time, same place, and super, super glad. If y'all have questions, we put our specific emails in the chat box. Please get in touch with us. Stay safe, y'all, and we appreciate you all. And we'll be in touch next week. Style messaging guides, toolkits, the things. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.